Hello, my friends. I'm going to be going through this week's lesson. It's independent versus dependent clauses and the four sentence types. All you have to do to view this video in a very simple fashion is to do what I showed you at school on Friday, which is to do the split screen so that you see this video on the right and you have your Google Doc open on the left-hand side so that you can type as you go and you don't have to toggle between two different screens, pausing and all that stuff. And if you don't remember how to do that, I attached a video to that Google Doc as well so that you can watch the video for the tutorial if you forgot or you weren't there on Friday. And then it'll make this process so much easier. All right. So here we go. I'm going to cover first the difference between independent and dependent clauses. So a clause, first of all, when we say that word, we mean that we have a subject and a predicate. And then you have to note the fact that there are two different types of clauses. So we can have an independent clause and a dependent clause. Independent clauses, like independent, like you can be by yourself, can stand alone. And they can stand alone because they express a complete thought. I have the example there for you. We ate an entire pizza. We is our subject. Ate is our simple predicate, and ate an entire pizza is our complete predicate. So in that case, you have an entire sentence. It is complete. It can stand by itself. Therefore, it is an independent clause. So you can use the words independent clause simultaneously or synonymously with a complete sentence. It can stand by itself. It's not a fragment and it's not a run-on. Independent clauses are complete sentences. Then we have dependent clauses. Dependent clauses cannot stand alone, and that is because they are fragments unless you revise your sentence. All dependent clauses start with a subordinating conjunction. And I know this is going to sound funny, but we're going to call all of those subordinating conjunctions AWOBIS words. Every single letter of that acronym stands for one of the subordinating conjunctions in the list that you see there on the left. Like although, after, as, when, while, until, unless, before, because, if, and since. You just kind of have to commit those to memory because every time you start a sentence with one of those words, you are creating a dependent clause. And if you don't revise your sentence, you will have a fragment. AWOBIS words, when you attach them to clauses to start them, it feels incomplete, like it leaves you hanging. So like the sentence that I have there for you, because we ate an entire pizza. Well, what happened because we ate an entire pizza? We don't know. That's why it's incomplete. So if you just take out because, then you've got a complete sentence. Or leave it, add a comma after pizza, and give me more information. Like because we ate an entire pizza, comma, we were very full. Okay, well, now I have a complete thought. I have a whole sentence with a dependent clause and an independent clause. So you just have to be careful. You have to know when you are creating fragments and when you're not. Okay. So in your Google Doc, all I have for you there is I want you to fill in the AWOBIS words. I know this might seem a little trivial, but I really think you need to be like remembering what these words are. So seeing the words, saying the words, typing the words. Because that way when we get to actually like identifying whether we've got simple, compound, complex, all that, the different types of sentences, it's going to really be handy for you to know when you have a dependent clause. And you only have a dependent clause if you begin the sentence with an AWOBIS word. Okay? So, and every single one of those that you see there in your sample, the first part of each of those sentences, the underlined portion, those are all dependent clauses because they begin with an AWOBIS word. Okay? So give those a go. Although we were tired, comma, we still kept playing. After the game, comma, we ate an entire pizza. As the timer ran out, comma, she scored one more point. When you leave, turn the lights off. All of those. I want you to just fill in each of the AWOBIS words. Now, there is one caveat here, and I just kind of picked up on it. So the second one, after the game, technically, after the game, that's a phrase. That's not a clause. Ahaha, I caught myself here. So I would need a verb here or a subject because right now I have neither. So that's a prepositional phrase. So even though it starts with an awubis word, this is still considered, after the game is still considered a phrase. Okay, so just be careful with that. All right. Now, what I want you to try to do is I want you to try to highlight whether each one of these is dependent or independent. Remember, dependent starts with an awubis word. I'm going to pause or have you pause the video here and give this a shot. And I want you to pause it and try it for yourself because that way you can see if you are on the right track or not. Okay? Because then in a couple seconds, I'm going to reveal the answers and then you can check your work. Here are the answers. Numbers 1, 3, and 5 are all dependent because they all start with an awubis word. And 2 and 4 are independent because they do not start with an awubis word and they have complete thoughts. Okay? All right. So now I'm going to go through the 4 different sentence types. The first one, simple. A simple sentence has one independent clause, meaning it can stand by itself because it has a complete subject and a complete predicate. The bus was late is one of these examples. The bus being the subject, was late being the predicate. Be careful. If it has a phrase in it, it's still considered simple. So like the example there, in 1969, man went to the moon. Man is the subject, went is the simple predicate, to the moon completes that predicate. That's my complete sentence there, the independent clause. Man went to the moon. In 1969, that's what we call a prepositional phrase. It tells when something happens. There is no subject, there is no verb, it is just a phrase. Therefore, it can't change the type of sentence that we've got here. It's still simple. The ballerina, a Harvard graduate, won a Tony Award. That's what we are calling an appositive phrase. An appositive phrase just basically like renames the noun that precedes it in the sentence. So the ballerina won a Tony Award is our complete sentence, our independent clause, and it's separated by an appositive phrase. And that works. It doesn't change the type of sentence we have. Same thing, I enjoy helping you, my awesome students. My awesome students is renaming you. I is my subject, enjoy is my simple predicate, helping you completes the predicate. That's my independent clause. My awesome students doesn't change the type of sentence whatsoever, so it's still simple. So you can have it simple as simple can be with just a subject and the predicate, or you can attach a phrase and it's still simple. Compound sentences are 2 independent clauses joined by coordinating conjunctions or fanboys. Hopefully you have those, like you have heard of those before, and you've kind of like committed them to memory. But if you haven't, they're there for you on the left: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And they also contain punctuation. Okay, so if you want to use a comma, you must have a fanboy because you start with your independent clause, follow that by a comma, include your fanboy, and then finish with the other independent clause. However, a semicolon can take the place of the comma and the conjunction. So you just decide how fancy you want to be, but you've got to be really careful because if you don't include the comma and the conjunction or the semicolon in the way that you're supposed to, you're going to end up with a run-on, which would not be good at all. So you just have to be careful with how you join 2 clauses together, and you have to know what you're working with. Are you working with a compound sentence, or are you working with a complex sentence? A complex sentence is an independent clause and a dependent clause, one of each. Remember, dependent clauses must start with an awubis word. If you begin your sentence with your independent clause, no comma is necessary. Like, I trust you. If you follow it up then with the dependent clause, because you keep my secrets, this sentence works. It's complete and you don't need a comma. Okay? However, you can be fancy and switch your order up. You can start your sentence with your AWOBIS word because you keep secrets. But if you do that, you must have a comma to separate. So start with independent, no comma. Start with dependent, comma. Those are the rules, you guys. You got to follow them, okay? And this is why I told you it's really helpful if you start committing these words to memory. So AWOBIS words, subordinating conjunctions. Fanboys, coordinating conjunctions. You use a coordinating conjunction for a compound sentence. You use subordinating conjunctions for complex sentences. It's just one of those things you just have to kind of commit to memory. Okay? All right. Compound complex. You've got two independent clauses this time and a dependent clause. So this sentence contains 3 clauses. Your dependent clauses still need an AWOBIS word. And this is where this kind of starts to get a little tricky because your dependent clause can start the sentence like I have here in the example. It can be in the middle of the sentence, or it can be the last clause in the sentence. You just have to remember, what do I put after each clause to then join it to the next clause? So if you start with a dependent clause, you need a comma. If you start with an independent clause, you need either a comma and a conjunction, like a fanboy, or a semicolon. And that's just the way it goes. So you have to know what each type is followed up by. Okay? That just constantly go back to the rules and remind yourself like what you're supposed to be adding in between each of the clauses. All right. Here's some practice. Now, I have 3 tasks for you for this particular practice. First of all, highlight all of the AWOBIS words that you see. And they can be in any of the clauses, okay? After you highlight the AWOBIS words, I want you to underline the dependent clauses. Remember, dependent clauses start with AWOBIS words. So if you're starting with an AWOBIS word, you want to underline that clause. Then at the end, I want you to identify what type of sentence we've got. Okay, is it simple? Is it compound? Is it complex? Is it compound complex? I'm going to pause the video here because I want you to give this a try. I do not want you to just watch me give you the answers. That will not help you whatsoever. If you want to see the first one that I do, like, I'm sorry to tell you, I can't do that. You're going to have to just like scroll up and look at the samples that I put for you in the notes. Okay. It's not enough to just copy down the answers because you're not going to get any practice. I'd rather you get the practice in with a safety net before, like, we show up and we're taking the test and you're like, I don't remember any of this material because I just wrote down the answers. So please pause the video, do yourselves a favor. This is for you, not for me, and give it a try. It's not going to harm you to get them wrong now because after you're done pausing, I'm going to show you the answers and you can correct yourself and see, is my thinking correct? That's the most important thing. It's good to make mistakes while you're learning, so I want you to make the mistakes now. Okay? Also, after you're finished with this practice, there are lots of other practices on that same Google Doc. You can choose to finish those, wrap them up today, but that is basically like your homework for the week. But if you're home doing nothing today, you might as well get it done today because what else are you doing, right? You don't want to wait till you have something else going on in the afternoon when we don't have snow. So I want you to just pause the video here, do this practice, check your work, correct your work if you got it wrong, and then do the rest of the practices in the notes or on the Google Doc rather. And then on Friday's class, I'll go over everything just like we've been doing as part of our routine. Okay? All right, I'm gonna have you pause here and then unpause when you want to see the answers. All right. So in the first sentence, after the test, after isn't a WUBIS word. However, it's not a dependent clause. Okay, that's a phrase. So I still have a simple sentence there. Number 2, that is complex because after the test ends, I added that verb. Now it's dependent. So I've got a dependent, comma, independent. That's complex. Number 3 has one subject, the principal, but it has 2 verbs, gave and let. Therefore, it's still simple. It just has a compound predicate. Then number 4, we have compound because I have 2 complete independent clauses joined by a comma and a fanboy, and. 5 is complex. I have a dependent clause followed by a comma and an independent clause. 6 is compound complex because it starts with a dependent and it's followed by an independent clause joined by another independent clause with a semicolon. 7, that's complex because I've got dependent, comma, independent. And then 8 is compound because I've got independent, comma, fanboy, so independent. Okay? It's just kind of like a mathematical equation or a recipe. You just put the things in the right order, you know what you've got, you check the boxes, and then you know what type you have. Okay, so this basically concludes the video. And like I said, I would rather you just get this done today while the material is fresh. And also then if you have questions, you can message me or send me an email. And I can get back to you, while you're at home working today and while I'm at home working today. All right. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you when we are back together.